Is there an inherent meaning to life? Or is it all something that you get to choose for yourself? Let's look at the evidence. Oh wait, the religious have no evidence, do they? They don't even seem to know what it means. Then let's go look at the empty claims and the theological slips that show that underneath their ignorant rhetoric, some of them actually know that they're completely full of shit. All of that coming up next. Today, we're going to go take a look at World Video Bible School and the host Eric Lyons as he tries, and miserably fails, to explain that life has some grand inherent meaning. But along the way, he admits that he knows that it's all just an emotional ploy, and absolutely none of it from the religious side is honest or reputable. I'm also going to take some time here to explain why arguing with the religiously delusional is often a complete waste of time, and why, except for a very, very few cases, most of them will never be able to change their minds. They can't. So hopefully this is going to be educational. Let's get on to Eric.
I wonder how many casual atheists have actually thought through the fact that atheism implies that life ultimately is meaningless.
Atheism implies nothing. Atheism is the lack of beliefs in any gods, period. That's all it means. So you're just wrong there, as if that's any surprise. But the reality is, if you want to look at reality, meaning is what we impose on it. My life has the meaning that I want it to have. No more, no less. What Eric here is talking about is meaning imposed on us from an external source. He's talking about authoritarianism, which I guess is no surprise considering his religious beliefs. According to the religious, you don't matter, and only their imaginary friend does. So keep that in mind as we move forward.
One of the world's most celebrated atheistic evolutionary writers of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Dr. Richard Dawkins, confessed that the universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no purpose, nothing, but pitiless indifference.
And he's right, because you have a completely ass-backwards view of reality, Eric. You expect reality to exist for you, and it doesn't. It just doesn't. This is where your overactive ego is getting in the way. You are not in control of the parade. Everything isn't here to celebrate your existence. The world doesn't care about you, and that hurts your feelings. Therefore, you and your ilk have invented this farcical religious idea that you are the pinnacle of reality, that everything was made specifically for you and your kind, so that you can feel better about yourself and your absolute insignificance in the big scheme of things. Because you don't like that. Well, newsflash for you, Eric. Too fucking bad.
A few years later, Graham Lawton penned a one-page article titled, "What is the Meaning of Life?" What answer did this leading atheistic evolutionist give? Here was his heavy-hitting first line. The harsh answer is, it has none. Your life may feel like a big deal to you, he wrote, but it's actually a random blip of matter and energy in an uncaring and impersonal universe. Other than subjective feelings of meaning and importance, atheism implies we will never get objective data on the matter. Atheism simply fails to capture a true or higher meaning.
And he's right too, because whether you like it or not, that's what reality actually is. It doesn't matter how much that might hurt your precious little feelings. That's the world that you actually live in. Now, I'm sure he's going to go off into Fantasyland in a moment because reality isn't conducive to his emotions, but that's a failing on Eric's part, not on reality's. The fact is, You are just another living insect on this insignificant planet. Life goes on whether you do or not. The planet was just fine before your arrival. It'll still be okay once you're dead. And there are a lot of people out there who just hate that idea, no matter how true it is. They desperately want to be important, even though, in the grand scheme of reality, they're just not. So, as should surprise no one, they just make things up to stroke their own egos. Welcome to religion, folks!
In light of such valid but depressing confessions about atheism, valid but depressing confessions about atheism.
And that right there tells you absolutely everything that you need to know. He acknowledges that it's both valid, but in his words, depressing. Well, too bad. Reality isn't here to make you feel good. You don't have to be happy about it. You just have to accept that it's true, because, like it or not, it is. So here we have someone who admits that what people like Dawkins and Lawton are saying is perfectly valid, but because it hurts his precious widow Fifi's, he's going to reject it. Because Eric Lyons is pretty pathetic. Alright, we already knew that. Anyway, back to your point, Eric. Keep showing us just how irrational you are.
I would simply like to point out two beautiful truths about theism, and specifically biblical theism.
Truth or claims? Because those are not the same things. I'm sure he'd like to think that these things are truths. I'm also sure that he's wrong. But let's go see.
First, a person can logically come to know that the God of the Bible exists.
Nope. A person can come to believe that the God of the Bible exists. To come to know anything, that requires some demonstrable basis in fact. Your feelings don't enter into it. And this is yet another place where the religious simply have no idea how the real world actually works. It's just more theistic word games, so let's spell it out. Knowledge is defined as facts and information acquired by a person through experience or education. Belief is an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. You notice that nowhere in the definition of belief is the claim that the statement is actually true or that the thing actually exists, right? That really is the difference between knowledge and belief. Knowledge has to be based on something demonstrable. Belief does not. You cannot rationally declare that you know leprechauns to be real, because you don't. You might believe it, but you cannot know it without some means of having objectively gained that knowledge. But words to the religious, well, they're just fluid things, and they can mean whatever the theist wants them to mean at the moment. It's just blatant dishonesty.
If matter demands a maker, if life on earth demands a life giver, if complex functional design in the universe demands a designer, and if the supernatural attributes of the Bible demand a supernatural author, then the evidence demands this verdict: the God of the Bible exists.
That's a lot of ifs there, isn't it? Because absolutely none of that can be intellectually validated. And that's the problem. It's a whole lot of claims and not a bit of evidence. It's a lot of emotional demands and not an ounce of intellectual integrity. This is what happens when you start with the unsubstantiated desire for there to be some kind of a creator, and all of a sudden, everything looks like it was created. The conclusion doesn't rise from the evidence rises from the conclusion. And that's wholly irrational.
Second, the Word of God gives mankind the meaning and purpose that he inherently longs for.
Speak for yourself. It certainly does nothing of the sort for me or for millions, nay, billions of others. Because the majority of humans on this rock, whether you like it or not, they aren't Christians. They don't follow the Bible. Therefore, just blindly declaring that the Bible has all the answers, Well, that's ludicrous at best. This is what happens when the weak-minded get overactive egos and start declaring that they've got the only way, when that's obviously and demonstrably untrue. But consider the source, I guess.
Please understand, rational Christians do not come to believe in God and in the Bible as the inspired word simply because we want some objective meaning to our life on earth.
Yes, you do. Now, granted, many Christians, perhaps most, they have never known anything else. They have these quote-unquote facts drummed into their heads since before the age of reason, and they simply have no concept of anything different. If you were told from the moment you were born that up is down and left is right, it would be incredibly difficult to imagine that you were mistaken. You'd have no other frame of reference. In fact, I get into arguments about this with other atheists all the time. They seem to think, wrongly, that the religious are reasonable human beings, that if we just present the facts to them, they'll realize just how wrong they are, and they'll just toss religion from their lives. Just because there are some former theists who do that, that doesn't mean that all theists will. The whole idea is ludicrously wrong. The unfortunate fact is, some of these lifelong fanatical Christians simply cannot see outside of their religious bubble. They have no concept of reality without God. They cannot imagine how things would possibly work without some magical father figure in the sky. Reality and religion are inexorably intertwined. You can't have one without the other. Further, a lot of these people's entire self-concept absolutely requires a God to exist. They cannot think of themselves without also thinking of a deity. If that concept of a God just went away, they'd suffer catastrophic cognitive dissonance. Their heads would explode. They just can't handle it, and they just can't imagine how it could be any other way. It's why so many theists are just such a waste of time in a debate. It isn't just that they have a bad understanding of the real world, it's that they can't conceivably reach a good one. Their minds have been terminally poisoned by religion. It will take a lot of information and internal reflection for them to walk away from their religious beliefs. And most of them will never do it. And those people, they deserve our pity.
Rather, once we see the evidence for God and His Word and commit our lives to the Lord in obedience to the gospel of Christ, our admittedly innate but formerly uninformed desire for a higher meaning is at that moment made complete by the perfect law of liberty.
Except there is no evidence. This just goes back to what I was saying before. When the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. When the only belief you have in your head is a God, then everything starts to look like God did it. That doesn't mean that God actually did it, though. It's why asking how they know things and pointing out the rational disconnect might help. It probably won't help the completely irrationally religious because, as I said, they simply cannot see the forest through the trees. But for anyone who's already started to ask questions, it might help them find their way out of the religious hell. You can't just declare that everything is evidence for a God, any more than a Hindu can claim that everything is evidence for Krishna, or that I could claim that everything is evidence for invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies. That's just a claim. Now, it rests solely on the claimant's shoulders to prove with evidence that it is actually demonstrably part of objective reality that their claimed deity did it. And that's where you'll start to see the religious veneer crack, because the theist can't imagine that anything but their God might be there. How do they know it isn't evidence for Thor? Well, they're just going to sit there and go, because they've got no answer. Then it'll be right back to a whole bunch of unsupported claims of knowledge and utter blind faith. It's actually kind of funny to watch. Give it a shot.
In fact, God gave his inspired words so that the man of God may be complete.
Well, that's the claim. Now, how do you propose to prove that it's actually true? And of course, he has no interest in that whatsoever. Even making a good faith effort is beyond his scope because to the religious, of course, they have to be right. It just gives them an emotional woody to think that they are. It's exactly why they don't make videos for the skeptics, because the skeptics would expect them to be able to back any of this up. And we all know they simply can't. It's just the deluded leading the deluded in a giant circle jerk. What else is new?
No doubt, part of this divinely given, God-revealed perfection or completeness is one's realization that the human life actually has real objective meaning.
That's what you'd like to think anyhow, but I've already pointed out a lot of places where you're wrong, and you'll just never acknowledge any of it for the reasons that I've already given. Reality gets in the way of your feelings, and because they value their feelings more than they do reality, reality gets ignored and their feelings get embraced. It's what happens with every irrational belief out there. Every religion is doing the same thing for the same reasons. None of them are able to sit down and have an intelligent discussion with another religion because they're too busy screaming at each other and often pulling out weapons and murdering each other. History is stained with the blood of religious conflict. Groups of irrational people playing, "My God has a bigger dick than your God" nonsense.
The best atheism can do is to ask people to choose individually for themselves what the meaning of human life is.
Because that's all anyone can do. There is no meaning of life writ large. There is a meaning that you can personally give to your own life, a decision that you can make about your own existence that each of us is able to make, and it may change many times over the course of our lives. Reality, like it or not, is messy, and unfortunately the religious often don't like that. They want everything to be orderly and predictable, and that's just not the way that it works. So they just make something up, and then they rail against reality when it laughs at their absurd beliefs. It's why I keep saying that part of the basic maturation process is coming to grips with reality as it is, not as you desperately wish that it was. It doesn't matter how much you wish the world was a certain way. It is the way that it is. Your feelings be damned. And they simply can't handle it.
But such meaning is entirely subjective.
Yes, it is. Why is this so hard for you? Because you just want to impose things on others, not simply choose them for yourself. And we come right back to the inherent authoritarianism of religious thought. Everyone has to be just like you because in enforced conformity, you find emotional comfort. Think about that for a while. This is all because the religious are emotional children.
One person could decide that the meaning of life is to eat as much good food and to have as many sex partners as possible. Another could easily say that the meaning of life is to explore space and to establish a colony on Mars.
Yep, they could do that. What business is it of yours unless their decisions demonstrably adversely affect you or other people? That doesn't mean you have to agree with their decisions, any more than they have to agree with yours, but so long as they are consenting adults doing things that are not harming anyone else, it's none of your damn business. Keep your nose out of their concerns.
On the other hand, Christianity offers the world real, objective meaning.
Christianity claims that. That doesn't mean that it actually does. We're right back to the religious being unable to tell the difference between the claims of their religion and the supposed reality of their religion. We don't care about what you claim. We care about what you can back up with objectively verifiable, testable, and intellectually demonstrable evidence. And unfortunately for you, you got none. There is nothing going on here other than, I'd really, really like for this to be the case, therefore it's gotta be true. If that impresses you, you've got problems.
The Creator of mankind has informed us that we exist on earth for the purpose of choosing, by the grace of God, where we want to live eternally.
And how do you know that? Where did you get that information, and how did you objectively test it to find out if it was actually true? Show your math. Now, he obviously can't do that, and he won't even try. He'll throw out a bunch of faith-based claims that don't stand up to a moment's critical scrutiny, and then expect us to just roll over and take him seriously. When we don't, he'll throw up a bunch of impotent threats at us, oh no, you're going to hell, and then he'll run away to hide in his safe space because he can't actually make a rational case for why any of the silly things he believes are actually true. It's really kind of sad, isn't it?
As we prepare to meet our Maker, He has instructed us to fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil.
And because some primitive person wrote it down on a scroll once, well, that just has to make it true, right? Nobody is impressed with their silly book of multiple choice. Nobody. Throwing verses at the non-believer will just get them to roll their eyes. It isn't going to convince anyone. But you're not looking to convince the skeptics because we'd ask the hard questions that you have absolutely no answers to. It's why the religious spend all of their time going after the uneducated and irrational and overly emotional, because those are the easy marks that fall for the religious spiel. They're after the same people as the Nigerian princes and those people who call you from Microsoft. You know, dumb people. Because that's really what we're talking about here. I hate to put it so bluntly, but okay, I really don't care. But that's what's going on. The religious are selling snake oil, and they are only interested in putting on their sales presentation for people who aren't smart enough to see right through the sham. Most of these religious shysters know that it's all a con game. Eric here knows that everything the atheists are saying is valid and rational, but because it doesn't cater to their feelings, well, they're just going to ignore it because it gets in the way of their emotional comfort. And that's what this is all about after all, emotional comfort. Reality means nothing to these people. They are delusional, and for far too many of them, it isn't something that can be fixed from the outside. It's something that they have to decide on their own to correct internally, but most, the vast majority, they never do. They will die believing the same things their equally deluded parents filled their heads with when they were young. They can't imagine how the world could be any different. It's why indoctrination is so important to the religious. They know that it's really hard to root that garbage out of someone's head when it got planted early enough. Aristotle said it correctly when he said, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." You can really screw someone up by filling their head with this nonsense at an early age. And all of this stuff is nonsense. Every bit of it. But the religious don't care, even if, as Eric Lyons here clearly does, they know that what the non-religious are saying is perfectly valid, rational, and, dare I say it, true. But truth is irrelevant to the emotional children that make up religious adherents. We need to pity these people. We need to stop them from playing in traffic like the children they are, but they deserve our sympathy. Most of them have had this done to them against their will. And then there are the people today, like Eric Lyons here, who are trying to encourage people to continue the cycle of abuse. I'm not sure if Eric deserves our compassion as a victim or our hatred as a victimizer. Let me know what you think in the comments.
bum.